Commodore RS Vasan, I am retired. The duration of the session will include Q&A session, which will commence after the presentation of Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM retired. The topic for the session is Sri Lanka, Genesis and Progenesis. I would request to the dignified participant to hold on to their questions till the chair indicate the inception for the Q&A session. For the Q&A, we'll also include the question that will be presented in the comment box of our YouTube channel. I would request to our YouTube viewers to keep their question short and to the specific speakers. Vasan sir, please.
Harisa? Is this on? Okay. May I have your permission to start? Welcome to the first session after tea break. I'm very happy with the kind of settings that were brought to you by Professor Suryanarayan as well as Ambassador Kanta during the inaugural session. I know that Ambassador Kanta took a little longer, but we are very happy that he did, because the entire range of discussions that we wanted to conduct here, he set the tone for that. So I'm very happy and grateful to both Professor Suryanarayan and Ambassador Kanta for being with us. And despite the health issues, Professor Suryanarayan has been here, and special thanks to you, sir. And we are grateful that you were able to come here and deliver the keynote address. His complaint always has been to me. He says it takes 20 minutes for a professor to warm up, and you want me to wind up in 20 minutes, and that's not fair. So I agree with you, sir, next time. Right. So this is, again, we have a galaxy of speakers here. All of them, I'm sure you're familiar with their writings. General Shankar, who is on the extreme left. In fact, I keep on pulling his leg and tell him that, in the morning I have to get up with the article and I have to go to sleep with your article. There's a frequency of his articles that are coming out from China to Sri Lanka to European Union or to the AI and whatever else. That is a range of articles that he brings to the table with his expertise. He's also a PhD. He's involved with the IIT today. And so we are very happy that he's with us today. Of course, then we have Sathiya Moorthy. Again, he needs no introduction at all. His analysis are extremely illustrative, educative, and it comes from his first-hand experience in Sri Lanka. He has been there, and both on Sri Lanka and Maldives, I must tell you that we worked together in ORF long ago, which is where I started my think tank career. Dignitaries from Delhi, from Maldives and Sri Lanka would come to Chennai to get briefed by ORF, and particularly from Sathiya Moorthy. This includes the former ambassador Nirupama and others who would come there and see, what is it that we should do. Yeah. So everyone has made it a point, and and at that time, Mr. Sathiya Moorthy made it a point to have closed door session with all these people, Maldives particularly at that time, and even Sri Lankan leaders who were there. So I don't think there's anyone who can compete with him in terms of his knowledge, his expertise, and his analysis of both Sri Lanka and Maldives. So I'm grateful that he's accepted to be here with us, despite certain amount of health issues that he has. But as long as here, I know that you will all gain immensely. And the student community, I will encourage them to ask the questions. Another point which Bala has not told you, the student community will not get their certificates if they do not ask questions. Number one. Number two, all of them are required to make a small summary of the event, a report on the event. You don't make that report, you don't get the certificate. Clear? No, I'm not accepting Colonel Hariharan's suggestion. He says, don't give them lunch. No, I'm giving you lunch. Yeah, we need you to be able to have energy to write. But these two are compulsory requirements for you to get your certificate of participation here. Otherwise, it will not be given. Okay, right. And of course, third, my very good friend and Colonel Hariharan. Somebody introduced me and Colonel Francis as veterans of 71 War. I said, here is a veteran of veterans. Who has also been participating of the 65 War. He's another excellent value addition to Chennai Center for China Studies. And, the kind of incisive approach that he has to his articles is something that you are familiar with. He was formerly with also the military intelligence. He's operated in Sri Lanka during the IPKF operations. I was also, of course, commanding a ship at that time in IPKF during the IPKF operations. So, though we did not meet each other at that time, because as a int man, he hid from everybody's view, whereas my warship was all over showing itself. So, but however, subsequently, we've been in touch with each other for more than 20 years, and it's a great honor, sir, that you accepted to be with us. And today, what we are going to have as far as the first session is some of this, the glimpse of what is likely to come out in this panel discussion is already available to you by way of the complete landscape that was brought to your notice by Ambassador Kanta. So what you are trying to look at is in the Genesis and Prognosis. So the first speaker will be Mr. Sathiya Moorthy, who will look at the issues related to Genesis and Prognosis. And we have a total of 1 hour 15 minutes, which also includes about 20 minutes of Q&A. I place a lot of emphasis on Q&A session because it allows the youngsters to come forward. And so I'll request all the panelists to kindly restrict themselves to 15 minutes. I know it may be too less, but what is not covered in 15 minutes definitely can take it up during the Q&A session and take it from a question and touch upon something that you may not have been able to do justice to in the 15 minutes that are allotted to you. With that, over to you, Mr. Sathiya Moorthy.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Commodore Vasan. So before I proceed to cover my topic, socio-political and socio-economic situation in Sri Lanka, or rather the background, just I want to touch upon an issue as someone was asking me over the tea about one issue that is in the mind of all of us. That's a Chinese vessel. Leave aside other things which my expert panel members and others in the afternoon will be talking about. Let us remember only one thing. What did India do to US on the Vietnam vote in UN after the PL 480 thing? Right? That was in the 60s. So this is how bilateral relations between nations happen. We can say the Sri Lankan stabbed us in the back and all that, which is fine, but this is how the relationship works between nations. Now, to my topic. See, basically, I would think that when Mrs. Indira Gandhi chose G. Parsardi Senior as her appointment for Sri Lanka, she may have thought that here is a Tamil diplomat who should know his Tamils in Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan Tamils and the Sri Lankan issue better. As subsequent events have shown that he did not, and many others who succeeded him did not know the socio-political dynamics of Sri Lanka. And as students particularly sitting in the back rows and who should be coming into the front rows in the upcoming generations, you need to know, particularly in the case of our neighborhood, as Professor Suryanarayanan pointed out, the socio-political dynamics of individual neighbors and how it works with us. Invariably for us, we will stop with the Tamil Nadu, Tamil connection, etc. That is not enough. And that is also only a a skewed view of Sri Lanka. The seniors here will tell you that when the Sri Lankan Tamils came here as refugees in the 83s, they were still claiming our culture is better than the Tamil Nadu Tamil culture. Our diction, our grammar, everything is better than the local Tamil. And they started using the umbilical cord connection and continues to use it only when it is convenient to them. Say, for instance, today, now, over the Chinese vessel, very many Tamil political leaders in Sri Lanka have criticized Sri Lankan government, China, etc. But previous 5 years, when they were in the position to vote out the government, they did not say a word about Hambantota being given on lease. I know of Indian High Commissioners telling me they haven't come and met me in 6 months. Whenever I ask appointment from TNA leaders, they say they are busy. But they will be seen in the US Embassy, with which Indian High Commissioner has shares a wall. So people use, because their dynamics, their politics is different. People, politicians or nations use each other, one another, or try to do so. We should not get carried away by it. That is the reality of politics and statecraft within course. As far as the other community is concerned, another thing you have to remember, caste politics is dominant as much in Sri Lanka as it is in India. Right? Whether it is in among the Tamils, among the Sinhala majority. That is one of the issues there. 2, among the Muslims. That is not as a caste, but it is specific localities and all that. Still, they are a divided lot. Among Tamils, every day you are talking about new parties. Right now, there is a discussion that the old parties have failed the Tamils. We should put together a new party. Some diaspora groups are working. Muslim, there are as many political parties as there are individuals. Right? Singhalas, you ask them. Singhala, for instance, majority of the Singhala community, Singhalas, as you know, is a majority community. But the majority community, the majority 55 to 60%, which is not prevalent in India, for instance, belong to the high caste Govigama community. This is again a socio-political dynamics that works. But within that, they have got subdivisions. Right? This is how politics works. If some of the decisions that people like President Premadasa, who comes as Professor Suryan often points out from a lower caste Hinna, or the Rajapaksas took, that was Rajapaksas or Govigamas, but they are not from the top rung. It has everything to do with their background, social background. They were not accepted by the high caste Kandyan, upcountry Govigamas, who used to dominate, who continue to dominate the scene in Colombo government, various structures of government that is slowly breaking down as it is happening in India over the last 70 years. Right? But it is not complete. That is a socio-political dynamics that matters more than ideology. It is not about Sinhala Buddhist ideology. It is more about this social. We, sitting from outside, it is easy for us to stamp it as a Sinhala, this thing, majority Sinhala Buddhist hardliner ideology. Behind that is not that. It is their support-based constituency which comes from that background. If anything, the current Aragalaya struggle has done, I think there is one speaker doing the topic on Buddhist politics in Sri Lankan affairs. I would say slowly the hold over the religion has ended, and the hold of the religion over politics is ending, and public and politics are going to decide the future of religion. For instance, this time round, you did not hear much about the prelates, the four important monks of Buddhism, making statements, asking the Rajapaksa to leave. They did it early on. But after that, it is not that they did not want to say that. There was no space for them in the media or in the social space, political space. So slowly that is happening. How it is going to work out, I don't know. Even yesterday, for instance, there was a protest by the Students' Union. That's the left-leaning Students' Union. I will come to that later. Photographs showed a lot of Buddhist monks participating in it. Remember, it is a Students' Union, University Students' Union, belonging to the left. Right? And there are Buddhist young monks. So, to easily confuse it, for instance, if you go to Kerala, in certain parts you would see Christian missionaries, parish priests and others, with a strong left-leaning orientation. That comes from their society. It is not that the church teaches them or not teaches them. Right? So this is where we have to make the other differentiation. Unfortunately or fortunately for them, there are too many monks for too small a population. It owes also to a political dynamics of the 90s when poverty and other things forced, rather the government said, we will give subsidy to various Buddhist organizations, monasteries. And each family was encouraged to send a child there. That has become a commercial proposition, to put it bluntly. This is another aspect. And one area we have forgotten in India, unfortunately, is the upcountry Tamils, right, who went from India. I can't entirely blame government of India or anyone else. They are most of them the Jaffna Tamils, or rather the Sri Lankan ethnic Tamils, because they keep fighting all the time. Politicians, just ego clashes. Around the time the war ended and before and after, I had talked to individual Sri Lankan Tamil groups, political leaders, talked to individual upcountry Tamils, and also Muslim leaders. I finally discovered it has nothing to do with ideology, it is ego. In fact, one leader told me, I have no problem to upcountry Tamil leader accepting that man. But this man, of course, some of you may be able to place. தமிழில் சொல்கிறேன், எங்கள் தாத்தாவுக்கு சேர் தூக்கிட்டு இருந்தவன் அவனை நான் எம்பி ஆக்கியில் அவன் இப்போ எனக்கு எதிர்த்து இருக்கிறான், அவனாக ஐ won't accept. This is a kind of politics. I think you would know whom I am talking about. Right? This kind of situation prevails, and India, for instance, doesn't have a constituency. I won't say we don't need a loyal constituency, but a constituency that is friendly. Sri Lankan Tamils are not. They use us like any other, like the Singalas or the Sri Lankan state. Upcountry Tamils have no voice there, and they don't have any voice with the Indian government also. That is one of the reasons was their leaders ensured that there was no communication other than outside the. Say about, I think when Ambassador Ashok Anda was High Commissioner, India donated 20 buses to the upcountry Tamils. The late Arunga Tondaman, who was the minister, said, I will not allow them to be released unless they are named after my grandmother. I think it went on for about 2 years. Like, then India, for instance, there is a old agreement. India has agreed to donate 25,000 milk cows to Sri Lankan government to be distributed among upcountry Tamils. I don't think it has happened in the last 40, 50 years, and I think that agreement has been allowed to lapse. When I told Tonda and others, Mano Ganesan and other Sri Lankan upcountry Tamil students, Appadiya, sir, is it? I don't know. They have been ministers for years. Right? And someone says, yes, we should do. There also there is casteism. There upper caste, Bellala, which is the dominant caste, among the Sri Lankan Tamils, are numerically few. The Tevas, because they were estate laborers, the Tevas who were Kankanis or supervisors, they are the more powerful. and the so-called Dalit labor do not have a voice. This is a reality. If you go to Jaffna, a friend of mine who should be now 50, 60, he told me even his childhood, that is the early days of the war, on, I think you would know, Nallur Temple Festival happened last week. On the 10th day of festival, they used to get the fisher folk, the Karavas, they are allowed the temple only on that day. They fund that day's festival. They would get film stars and others from Tamil Nadu, film playback singers, etc. And these Dapna Vellala children would steal their way to hear that. When they came back, they used to be beaten up and would be made to sit on the road, and water will be poured on their head to be allowed to. Right? You ask any Tamil leader today, no, it is all before the war. It is not. The diaspora guys from the north and the east who went there, they continue to practice it. Like our Indian NRIs who went there 50 or 60 years, they are so guilty, so they start promoting religion, religious philosophy here on WhatsApp without bothering to come and stay here. Right? So also continuing, and today diaspora groups are going to become more influential in the affairs of the Sri Lankan ethnic Tamils for the simple reason that TNA is dying and others are fighting. Likewise, it is happening in the Singalas. If you have noticed, in the last 5 years, the nation's two major Singala political parties, which are also the two major political parties of the nation, namely the UNP and SLSP split. And you don't need a speaker unless you want to record it. Right? And that is the scenario. It has...
Another 3 minutes?
Huh?
Another 3 minutes?
I better. Oblige. Only, is right? Likewise, this struggle, it was, much as we would want to believe, it is a people struggle. Yes, every section of the society came in, anti-Rajapaksa, because of the price rise and crisis. There were basically two components initially. One was the urban middle class, which was always pro-liberal, pro-right, etc., and anti-Rajapaksa by instinct. Second was the rural population, which the breakaway group of JVP, Professor dealt with JVP a couple of times, called a Frontline Socialist Party, whose leaders, they have hijacked the trade unions, they have hijacked the students' union, they were behind it all. Thankfully, Ranil Wickremesinghe came over and drew the red line. That's why Sri Lanka is what it is today. Whether he is right or wrong, whether he can get through, whether he has got through beyond Rajapaksa rule, because it was very clearly known even at that time when the struggle began, and I was discussing it with a lot of Sri Lankan from all the sides on phone. I said ultimately it is the Rajapaksas, it may not be a Rajapaksa regime, but Rajapaksas will continue to rule because they will have the MPs. And despite their houses being burnt, on May 9th, 78 ruling SLPP political leaders, including that of all the Rajapaksas, were burned down in a matter of 4.5 hours. Across the country, which means it was an organized force which did it. And when that happened, they possibly thought, that the MPs will be frightened to stay away. Unfortunately, they have come together. They now need the party more than the party needs. That's the situation even for the Rajapaksas. That having been said, there is one simple message that this struggle for us has for us, India, particularly South India and Central India, it is a left militancy that took over. If someone here takes an inspiration from there, they don't need funds, that all comes next. We may also be in a similar situation, but not on these issues, right? Because even after Gota left, and until the Rebel government struck, those people were saying only one thing. We could get this outside of Parliament, outside of Constitution, and outside of Supreme Court. And they actually did it. Which means that is a very, very dangerous one-liner for across South Asia, particularly South India and Central India, where we have left-leaning militancy lying low, much as what the government may say, they have crushed them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Satyamurthy. I think we started off well on this session. It is very important to understand, what is the basis for the present crisis. From that point of view, the issues that you brought out on social issues, caste-based politics, and other things which are there, which affected the layers of society, they are of great importance. And I have no doubts that the youngsters will have a lot of questions subsequently. And I will call upon Colonel Hariharan to come up, sir, and 15 minutes for you. I know it's very, very short, but I'm sure you will do full justice in 15 minutes.
Up or down? Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I thank C3S for giving me an opportunity. But in really speaking, in 15 minutes, the country's future foreign policy cannot be examined. But for the benefit of students, I have specially devised this presentation, mainly because students are attending it. So without much ado, I will start how I have viewed this foreign policy, not by what Sri Lanka has declared or entered into various treaties or agreements or statements, but from a geostrategic point of view. Not going ahead. This one. This. This is the Sri Lanka's geostrategic compulsions. If you take a look at it, it is the proximity of India which dictates Sri Lanka's policy. Whether it is China policy, US policy, or anybody's, India sits on its head. That is why there is a love-hate relationship with India in Sri Lankan polity across the board, including Tamils, Muslims, or Sinhalese parties. We must understand this because first thing they ask is India is a big brother, behaving like a big brother. It is a big brother. That's a fact. I will not go into the proximity issue, but much hype is made of the Chinese coming. Actually, the Chinese should be worried. My mother used to ask me, I had been an insurgency specialist, handling nearly 23 insurgencies in my life in Bangladesh, Northeast, some Burmese, and Sri Lanka. So she used to ask me, You are going alone as an intelligence man. Aren't you worried? I said, they should be worried. I am a professional guy of a professional army. I used to tell my mother, they are all amateurs. So when people talk of Chinese coming to Sri Lanka, don't be overtaken by this Hawa. They are 2,000 kilometers away. We are exactly, according to Sri Lankans, 29 kilometers away. There's a lot of things we can do before 2,000 kilometers can. We must bear this in mind. So first thing Sri Lankans think is, how will India react? What can we benefit from India? That is the first thing. We should not forget that. I will not dwell on this because the others will be talking on this. Then it is a strategic strategic pivot in Indo-Pacific. I will touch upon this briefly. Then there is a locational advantage as strategic hub. This also works in Sri Lanka's mind. Sri Lanka, Colombo port is the 25th busiest port in the world. 50 to 70% of Indian container traffic goes through that. Sri Lanka needs it as much as we need it. So even if Colombo port city comes, who will invest? India has to invest. Chinese will not come and invest unless they have a business, unless it is for money laundering, which is likely. So it has to, this logistic hub is a very important thing for Sri Lanka. If you see their foreign policy, always this, or development policies, always this logistic hub is there. So let us not underestimate these external factors which are based on geostrategy rather than mere politics. Which one? I talked of strategic pivot. I hope you know Brzezinski for the students. You can dust up. He has made a statement. I am not going to repeat the statement. It is there, written there. But it is derived from not their power and motivation, but from their sensitive location. This is what Sri Lanka is because of the sensitive location. Because it makes them a point from which potentially vulnerable activity can take place. So you must, when we talk of Sri Lanka's importance, it is not the size. It is sitting just astride the Indian Ocean, dominating the sea lanes of traffic. What is that, 4-degree line or whatever it is, goes straight to Malacca Strait across from Trincomalee. It goes to that choke points. So this very much dictates Sri Lanka's importance and others' attitude to it. This is, since you are all students, I am not a political history student, political science student. I have studied only military strategy and practiced it. But I know what strategic pivot is. This is how we base our operations. In the geostrategic theory, he says, foreign policy is guided by physical geographical factors. Its success depends on the context. This is what China is doing now. Its success is in this context, current context, where it is devised. China and India are devising it. And nationality, strength of resources, goals, and political geography. That is why China is focusing on Sri Lanka. Because Sri Lanka, they would like to overtake and influence Sri Lanka. This is the logistic hub I was talking about. It is coming up. It is going to overlook the Colombo port. So it is a very good eavesdropping point. As an intelligence guy, I am always suspicious of even myself. So this I can see, I can talk to you the whole day about the negative aspects. But the positive aspect is, earlier I brought out who will invest there to make it successful. India has to participate, international community has to come. This is not China's project originally. It is the pet project of Sri Lanka. They wanted to, I think it was, father of this is the present president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who wanted an international finance city that would overtake Singapore and Dubai, because it is midway and advantageous for Sri Lanka. And the Chinese pandered to the ambition of Hambantota and this Colombo port city. Hambantota was Rajapaksha's project, Mahinda's. This was the pet project of Ranil. So they are both culpable or guilty of this dreaming ambitiously. And China has been pandering to this. Actually, these were offered to us also. We didn't take, because it, financially it was not viable. I am touching upon, upside down, how the highlights of Sri Lanka's India policy. I have purposely omitted some pedestrian things. I have focused on issues which matter. You can see we were recognized immediately. The relationship was established. First thing that happened was the upcountry, the plantation labor, now called upcountry Tamils, of Indian origin, they were disenfranchised. The biggest supporters of the move were, at that time, the Tamils also, Sri Lanka Tamils. We should not forget that, because they belong to a lower caste. So all the Tamilians who pat I am a Tamilian very much, pat themselves, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kalir, it is not so simple. Even now, they are struggling. Then the Sirimavo Shastri, Sirimavo Gandhi Pact, Indira Gandhi Pact, to give citizenship. It was never fully enforced. It was Tondaman's efforts, which, because they wanted to, the major parties wanted the Tamil votes, the plantation Tamil votes, they gave citizenship. The issue was closed in 2003. This is how the politics works. I subscribe to what Mr. Satyamurthy was saying. And there were 4 maritime agreements signed between 74 and 76, delineating the international maritime boundary, particularly in Gulf of Mannar. You can see the issue has not been solved because we didn't raise the issues from Tamil Nadu at that time. We went along with that. And that is the lingering fisherman issue, apart from, of course, using the modern modern technology. So traditional fishing of Indians, that is Tamil Nadu fishermen, has been denied. There is, I remember I had discussed this with Sri Lankan leadership also on how this can be solved. Jointly they should develop, as they have done in North Sea agreement, fishermen's agreement, Ireland and France and Britain, then Norway and Ireland, they have tried to work out modalities. Then, of course, the 1983 program that has left very deep scars on the relationship, because the hundreds of thousands of Tamils fled Sri Lanka. They are established all over the world, apart from Tamil Nadu. They are influencing Canada's policy, they are influencing British policy, and to a certain extent in USA also. These Tamils, they are elected as local or parliamentary leaders, representatives. So there is this lingering influence. This also conditions Sri Lankan policy. You know the history of after the post 1983. I will not dwell upon it. Indo-Sri Lanka Accord and the IPKF induction. It's very well documented. Now recently, 2022, two maritime security cooperation agreement has been signed. Very significant. I will touch upon it later. The Indo-Sri Lanka agreement, I told you, left very deep, it influenced Sri Lankan. At that time I was in Sri Lanka from 87 to 90. So I have discussed with ministers, politicians, Sri Lankan army, their intelligence heads, with various guys. It was seen as an insult to the nationhood. That is how Premadasa came, got elected. And actually, it was Indian troops were sent at the request of J.R. Jayawardena, essentially to protect him, because he feared an army coup. We sent naval commandos and our commandos. Yeah. So I will not dwell upon this. You can take a look at the agreement itself. It is not only for protecting Tamils. Tamils had this illusion. This, after I have taken this, you can go through that since I am running out of time. And the last two was a marked change. You know, otherwise Rajapaksa was promising 13th Amendment plus giving autonomy to Tamils. He didn't enforce it. What was the thing, that trigger you should examine, that turned him, because China bailed out Sri Lanka in UN. That was a very important contribution. So, from then onwards, I feel China's policies, Sri Lanka was skewed in favor. Again, I have given this summary of this. This is the summary of Indian policy initiatives. The first encapsulates as I perceive it, how passive phase from 91 to 2006, moderately active between 2006 and 13. You can, if you go through the timeline, everything will be evident. Then from 2014 onwards, it has been energized by India. Neighborhood first, Sagar, BIMSTEC initiative. COVID, and people left out COVID also. There's a very important lesson from that. And the Indian Security Conclave, which has been gingered up in the last two years. This is India, Maldives, Sri Lanka. Together, they have a maritime patrolling agreement, which is being added now with Bangladesh, Mauritius, Seychelles, who are observers. This is going to be the future, and Sri Lanka will shape its policy. And Quad, you should not ignore. In future, I can see already Americans coordinating their action. Even when the Chinese supply ship, Chinese so-called spy ship came with India. There is a American warship getting repaired. I am amazed. When it took, they select Kottupalli to repair. So, as an intelligencer, I am always suspicious when somebody suddenly repairs the ship in Kottupalli for the first time. So, we should not underestimate Quad framework. In future, I see early signals of India being the pointsman for Quad, coordinated action. This is my perception. These are the waves of Chinese influence. It is all already spoken. Many have touched upon this. But you should not forget the rubber for rice pact. It continued for a long time. It has a deep psychological influence, particularly in the south. And the Belt and Road Initiative, and how China is lying low in the post-COVID economic growth, both for internal and external reasons. And these are going to dictate the Sri Lanka's foreign policy dilemmas, not mere economic factor. All this, because Sri Lanka is trying to make transactional relationship with India into strategic relationship. The Sri Lankan High Commissioner in Delhi is in constant touch on this issue. He has published, it is in public domain, his document, what he plans to do. It is available. We have discussed also with the High Commissioner what they want to do. So, there will be further animation, and that will be resisted by China. So, it is going to be like a chess game, like the one we recently held. This is how I see trade and commerce, very important. India was the first signatory of the free trade agreement, but it has become stagnant. Now China is compelling Sri Lanka to sign a free trade agreement. And Singapore also is there. That we try to float an economic cooperation agreement, technical and cooperation agreement, we will never see light in the same way, because there is a lot of political objection to it. It's a politically is not acceptable, but it is being given some other form from what I discussed with the High Commissioner. And Quad I touched up. I think the IMF package will be dictated by what Quad perceives as what is good for Sri Lanka. There should be, I have no iota of doubt. It doesn't come from international community like a milk of kindness. It comes with a strategic cost. There is going to be emphasis on ethnic reconciliation next month, September. They are coming, but they will be under pressure. The resolution is coming in UN Human Rights Commission. So what India is going to take stand, what China and US, now US is back in Human Rights Commission. In Trump's time, they went out, whether they will bail out. And China will be focused on managing it. It will scale down or upgrade its Operation Sri Lanka based on the strategic environment. I am a firm believer in that, because China believes in strategic moves. It plans for 50 years to upgrade its navy, and it is achieving it. So we should not underestimate. This is my perception. If you have any doubt, you can ask me anytime. I'm open. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Hariharan. I think that's an excellent exposition of the dilemmas of Sri Lanka, a small island country which has the advantage of being placed where it is, right at the tip of the Indian Ocean region, and it's also doing very well in terms of its tourism, in terms of ship activities, Colombo port city, etc. Yet the kind of dilemmas which are there is obviously a result of the successive policies that have been implemented by mostly Mahinda Rajapaksa and his clan. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions on this. The last speaker of this session is General Shankar. I'll request him to come forward and make his presentation. At the end of this, we'll be having a Q&A session. And like I said, students, monitored, no questions, no certificate.
Commodore Vasan, ladies and gentlemen. Commodore Vasan, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. We're going to talk of role of external players in Sri Lanka. I'll not go into the history of all these fellows. We know it and we've heard. So we'll go forward. What each one has a role to play at this point of time and what will be ahead. In doing so, I would like to give you first an overview as to what the importance of Sri Lanka is geopolitically. Because a lot of what is happening today comes from the geopolitics of this area and this global power rivalry which is going on in the Indian Ocean region as part of the Indo-Pacific construct. Right? You look at it, the importance of this line is called the Chagos Archipelago. It comes from Diego Garcia, where there's a US base. Is this pointer there? Yeah. No pointer. Okay, no pointer. Okay. From this blue line which I have put, comes through the Maldives, and thank you. It comes from Maldives and goes up to Lakshadweep. Now this divides the Indian Ocean into two regions. Okay. Now the control of the eastern, Indian Ocean is exercised today in today's geopolitical construct between India, Diego Garcia, and the Andaman Nicobar Islands, and these control this part of the Indian Ocean. Right. The next triangle, which I would call it, I call it a triangle, is between the mainland of India, Diego Garcia and Agalega Islands, and the US bases in the Middle East. Right? This controls the western part of the Indian Ocean. Now there's a disruption here. China, which is aspiring for global power status, is now established itself at Gwadar, though the base has not come up. It has got a base already at Djibouti. There's a base which is being established in the process, for which the first salami slice is the visit of this Yuan Wang Fai into this area. And Kiakiafu, which is part of this China-Myanmar economic corridor, where they want to get the CMAC comes down from Yunnan into Kiakiafu, and this gives a quadrilateral to China to control the Indian Ocean and disrupt the effort of the Indians and US at this point of time. This is where the power play is, and if you look at it from this point of view, you will see why all this nonsense is going on in Sri Lanka to a large extent. This is an infused problem in Sri Lanka with the Chinese thing. No, we've heard many people say that no, China is not to be blamed completely, but China is the root cause which has pump primed. When you in technology, you have a laser. Laser is what you use, ruby. What do you do when you want to get light out? You pump prime it and light comes out. That's something like that which has happened because China has pumped Sri Lanka into instability. Okay, now when you look at the external players, they are directly related to what Sri Lanka owes the world today. And this is the debt portfolio. So who are the great players? It's the international aid agencies, China, Japan, India, USA, and Pakistan. So we'll just go over this. I'll just highlight to you what each fellow or what each of these are doing today in Sri Lanka. Now when you look at the international agencies, they have to infuse liquidity to ease the crisis. That's the fundamental. Otherwise the crisis doesn't go. Right? But what do they want? They restructure all the loans. All the loans which Sri Lanka owes to all those people, which I showed in that pie chart, have to be restructured. Otherwise, IMF will not part with the money. But then IMF wants withdrawal of subsidies, withdrawal of tax concession. Both these have political implications. A lot of problems today in Sri Lanka are from this, what Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa did over a decade plus. Okay. Then China is reluctant to restructure the loans. Okay, I'll talk of China a little more, which Ambassador Kanta also said in his talk. Right. Next, India and Japan have to stand by Sri Lanka. Because like I said, the three major debtors of Sri Lanka or creditors of Sri Lanka are China, India, and Japan. And luckily, Japan and India are doing things together. Then you have internal and external political implications. We'll touch upon this a little later. And it needs good governance, which is the million-dollar question. Right? Whether Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe will be able to bring it about is a million-dollar question. Whether he'll be able to get this, tax concessions and subsidies is a million-dollar question. Whether this caste, creed, and social issues get resolved by Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is again a million-dollar question. Does he have the political capital to do so is also a different issue. And of course, the latest news I heard, I don't know how far it is true or not, that this chap Mahinda Gotabaya wants to get back to Sri Lanka. Whether it happens or not is a different thing. Okay. Now let's look at China. China is Sri Lanka's biggest creditor. Officially it is 10%, but if you look at the entire loans, which Mr. Kanta also said, he said about 19%, but my analysis says it's 26%. Okay, which is a huge amount. The next point, Sri Lanka has got 16 IMF bailouts. This is just a reinforcement of what I said. There will be a little overlap between what others have spoken and I have spoken, and we'll go over it. Okay. Now, China was an alternate lifeline, free from the tough policy reforms and conditions. That's why they went there. Of course, the politics were different. And China gave active political support for the Rajapaksa family, so its role is very deep-rooted. Then, of course, the mega projects and their social impacts and viability are all overlooked. Okay. Now, this is important, what is here in green. In 2020, China gave an evergreening loan of $3 billion. At that point of time, if China had gone to the IMF, things might have been pulled back. It wouldn't have come to this level. This evergreening loan is a feature of China, and actually China has got caught in this evergreening, not only here in overall Belt and Road Initiative, which I am writing an article, maybe this Sunday you'll see it in the Sunday Guardian. Go through this. Okay. Now, as far as China is concerned, this is the first major uncontrolled collapse where China is a dominant lender. So China is in pain. So if someone says China is going to do everything in this world, sorry, there are problems. Now, the blue one, China's economy is slowing very significantly, and it has already curbed its role. And the risk appetite in Sri Lanka is going down. It is marked. In fact, there's an anti-Sri Lanka sentiment in China that China doesn't want to fund Sri Lanka anymore. And Sri Lanka is worried, China is worried that it might burn its fingers in Sri Lanka. If it burns its fingers in Sri Lanka, their global ambitions are out. So there is a risk and reward thing at play, and that gives us an opening as to what to do. Right, the last one on pink, China would seek bespoke negotiation and preferential treatment because they want their loans recovered. They're not bothered how what happens in Sri Lanka. Okay, like I said, Chinese sentiment is anti-Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka is a vital globe in China's global dreams. Right, no solution is possible in Sri Lanka without Chinese, some concurrence or participation or anything. It will not happen. Let's not this thing. Okay. The thing for us is we need to leverage China's debt burden with other countries because that's how you can get China to behave here. China has got loans all over. Unless China restructures its loan all over the world, China's economy is on the verge of collapse. Right? So there has to be a restructuring of these loans, and those restructuring of loans, if it gets leveraged with Sri Lanka, you have a hope forward. Okay, I'll not go into this. These are where it is. Right. What is Japan? Now, Japan has been a major player in aid to Sri Lanka. The good part of whatever, I'll not go over all this. The good part of what Japan has been doing is they've been going by some norms. They've been following the norms of UN, they've been following the norms of the World Bank and the IMF and doing projects which are pro-people, with a lot of diligence. So to that extent, Japan has got deep roots in Sri Lanka and can be used as a counter to China, right? And of course, we'll come to India also. And with the kind of Indo-Japanese relationship, I think there's a lot of scope for India to act. Okay. More importantly, what is Japan doing? It's pushing for a free and open Indo-Pacific. What Colonel Hariharan said, role of Quad will come in. Okay. Now, very importantly, in May, just a few months back, Japan gave a humanitarian loan of 3 million. Basically, food, shelter, aid, that kind. Now, Japan wants to implement the humanitarian assistance activities, medicines, and things like that. Japan also supports Sri Lanka along with the IMF deal. Today, Japan and India are the two countries which are standing by Sri Lanka to assist with the IMF deal, otherwise they'll not get it. The third angle is US will come to that. Okay. Right, then the last part is that India and Japan have joined hands. Now let's look at India. What is India's twin interest in Sri Lanka? You want stability in your civilizational neighbor and you need to marginalize Chinese influence. These are the two overriding issues. Okay, civilizational neighbor is one way of looking at it. It is your next neighbor. You also have a cultural neighbor. You have an ethnic neighbor. Okay. Notwithstanding all the hues of Tamils right from Chennai down to, say, midway through Sri Lanka, they are still Tamils. There is a problem overflowing both ways. Okay. We know India has been most helpful and 3.8 billion we've given currency swaps, etc. We need a comprehensive plan to increase economic and other infrastructure with Sri Lanka. Now, the middle one is important. Sri Lanka, India is alongside Sri Lanka to get the IMF loan through. 3 months back, I think Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman was in Washington with IMF when Sri Lanka were negotiating this loan, or the first thing started. Without India, I don't think Sri Lanka will get this loan. Because today, unless India gives virtually a guarantee, IMF is not going to part with the money. So to that extent, there's a bit of a logjam which is going on, and we have to understand it in that. Of course, we've been a friend in need, and no other country has come, but we have our own issues, which Mr. Moorthy also spoke, Mr. Colonel Hariharan spoke, and also others spoke. I've just put it as a devolution of power to Tamils, as a major head, because others have spoken about the minor issues. Okay, we also have to understand this business of the Yuan Wang 5 coming in the context of what is happening in Sri Lanka and why China is going to force its way in. Okay, they will, after all, they owe the maximum, so and they have a proper agreement for 99 years lease of Hambantota, and they want to establish it as a naval base, which I've shown you in the first slide. So they have to force their way in. The important thing which has happened in this, which I want you to understand, and that's very important, is for the first time in the past 25 years, we have told China to lay off. Never before has anyone told China to defer its move, or stop its move, or reconsider its move. It would be facile to think that China will not enter Hambantota at its will and pleasure. It's their port. Okay, but for the first time, someone has said, sorry, don't come here. That is a great message. The world is alive to that. It's nothing very great. This ship, which is being, the satellite tracking ship and all that is, okay, fine. Why is China getting these satellite tracking ships? That is also one needs to understand. India doesn't need it. USA doesn't need it with the kind of bases, land bases you have all over the world. China doesn't have. Today, if you leave Shanghai or the South China Sea, the next base which China has is Djibouti, nothing between. So they have to go through with the ship-based trackers. And for all you know, these satellite trackers are also to control their own satellites which are in space. But then I'm diverting away from the... Yeah, we'll do that. So this is what India is, but then we'll talk about it a little later. What is USA? It has got strategic convergence with India. It's allowing India to play the lead role. It will strengthen the Indo-Pacific strategy. And as days go by, it will play a stronger role. If the IMF deal has to come through, USA has to give its okay. Pakistan. We have not spoken of Pakistan much, but just remember, Pakistan has a very central role in what Sri Lanka and the way it behaves. It has always had good ties. It was the main provider of arms during the LTT period and the period of civil war. All right? It has got the capability of playing a spoil sport at China's behest. While it has its own problem, we must understand the docking of PNS Timur. While everyone was focusing on Yuan Wang 5, there's a Pakistan naval ship which is docked in Colombo. We also must remember, despite all the cricket team going to Pakistan, getting shot at, etc., they still have good relations. Right? So we have, these are the things which are happening in the way the other players are playing. I'll stop here because in the evening when I get back, I will then say what are Indians' options as part of the other panel. Thanks. I'm sure you'll have questions. We'll take them on after this.
Just have 3 chairs put here. Don't put the table, just put the chairs. Thank you, General Shankar. I think it's an outstanding presentation in terms of how external players are there. And thank you for that. And just put 3 chairs there, yeah. May I request the panelists to come and kindly be seated? So I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions there. So I do not want to, I have extended the session by another 12 minutes. We are supposed to finish by 12:15, but we did start at 11:15. So therefore, there is this 15 minutes. So I don't mind, but like I said, please keep your questions brief, number one. Number two, say who it's addressed to, right? And no long commentaries at all. We don't want any commentaries. And if you have a long commentary and you want to make a presentation, we'll have a separate lecture organized for you in Chennai Center for China Studies. All right? Okay. Let's see some hands going up at the back. Yeah, good. Good to see some hands going up. Chalo, get up. Please pass the mic to her. Please identify yourself, which college, and thereafter say who your question is addressed to. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Danya from Madras University. Can you hear me, sir? So,
You can come here.
okay.
Come forward and make your question. What are the cameras? So all the camera guys are here, so you have to be on the camera only if you are here. Come and stand here and make your question.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Danya from Madras University. My first question is to Sathiya, sir. You spoke about caste politics happening in Sri Lanka. It's been happening for some time. And Tamil Nadu also is affected by caste politics. And my question is, you spoke about how left militancy is taking over. It's laying low right now. So can you explain briefly how it will affect India's security, especially Tamil Nadu security, sir? Left militancy.
We'll take all the questions together because of constraints of time. I request the panelists to kindly make a note and respond together so that we have proper assessments of this. You can go back.
I have another question.
You have one more question?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I have a question to Colonel Hariharan as well. So my question is, you spoke about logistics hub in Sri Lanka, and you said India's investment is much needed there. And how is it going to affect with the Hambantota port as well? So is it going to play any? Is it going to affect both of the investments happening, like China's involvement?
Hold on, sir. Let me take some more questions.
Yeah, that's
And Bala, please supply some paper and pen for the panelists so they can make note of this and respond together. Otherwise, we'll be having only dinner. Right, next. Yeah, only from the back, nothing from the front. Please come forward. Yeah, you can also come here. Come here and make your questions. One more.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is actually...
Identify yourself, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Lara. I'm a third-year development studies student from IIT Madras. My question is directed towards Lieutenant General Shankar, sir. Considering India's proximity to Sri Lanka, there's always been a lot of potential for creating infrastructural linkages. And there have been various projects that have always been, that have had a lot of feasibility studies over the years. More recently, there have been plans, according to the Sri Lankan Power Ministry, to create the interlinking of power grids between India and Sri Lanka. But do you think that with the current situation that Sri Lanka is in, that it forces itself to see India more as a provider of various infrastructural support? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, come. Some more, I saw one more hand there. Please come here.
So good afternoon. Myself, Madhumita. I'm from Madras University. My first question is to Sathiya, sir. So you are talking about the caste-based politics, which have destroyed them, and they were in this economic crisis. Is there any chance this caste-based politics can make a positive impact in Sri Lanka in the upcoming days, in the upcoming year? Another question is to Colonel Hariharan, sir. So you were talking about India is 29 kilometer and China is about 2,000 kilometer to Sri Lanka. And on 16th August 2022, there was a spy ship dockyard was identified near to the Sri Lanka. What was your view on it? So how does it affect our security thing? And my other question to Lieutenant General Shankar, sir, you told about the players, external players, things and all. So export have been reduced from India's export have been reduced from 2.16% to 1.3%. So it is also a issue to our economic thing. So how can we tackle this situation because of the Sri Lankan crisis? So that's it. 3 questions.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Next
sir.
one. The last one, after that, if there be time, we'll take
good
it.
afternoon,
Also,
sir.
hold on
This
one
is-
second. Please remember, there are also other panels. Some of these questions can also be taken up by other panels because of time constraints. So we'll stop with your questions. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. This is D.S. Murugan Yadav from University
Oh,
of
you're already
Madras.
standing here? Come.
So my first question is to Sathiya Moorthy, sir. So, sir, I have two questions for you. So my first question is there any possibilities or amicable solutions that are available to resolve the political ego that has been existing between the political parties of Tamils in Sri Lanka? So what are all the factors that are preventing this unity among the Tamils? Is that the Sinhala Buddhist ideology, or again the social lacuna that has been prevailing between the Tamils? My second question to you is like, how does the present political leadership in Tamil Nadu views the politics of Sri Lankan Tamils, and how the political parties of Sri Lanka views the Tamil Nadu political leadership? This is my questions for you. And again, sir, I have
Brief
two more
questions.
questions to Colonel Hariharan,
No
sir.
explanation, just the
Yes, sir.
questions.
Sir, right after the suspension of Chinese energy project, we could witness the visit of Chinese ambassador to the northern province, making visit to the Nallur Murugan temple and donating books and laptops for the library. So do you think like this is the Chinese stunt to gain the influence of Tamil people? So how do you see this? And how this will affect the umbilical relationship that has been existing between the Indian Tamils as well as with the Sri Lankan Tamils? These are my questions.
Yeah, next. Since these two are already in the queue, I don't want to disappoint them. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, myself
Just questions.
Yes, sir.
No elaborate background information.
Yes. Myself, Nitin Prabhu, sir. I am from University
Keep
of
it closer.
My question is to you, sir. Sir, does Sri Lanka is really worrying about India asking help? Because, as you said, Pakistan, the relation between the Pakistan and Sri Lanka is in a comfortable level. But being a large, even I am working on food security, so I'm concentrating on the Sri Lankan food crisis. So I just studied about that. Pakistan is the largest importer of. Sri Lanka is the largest importer of rice from Pakistan. So from India's perspective, being the largest second largest producer of rice, why Sri Lanka is not seeking help from India rather than demanding from Pakistan?
Okay, next. Last question.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Aishwarya and I'm from Women's Christian College. And my two questions are, I did not understand the meaning of ethnic reconciliation, and you've been talking about virtual guarantee. So I wish to know what is the virtual guarantee that India would have to give, and how will India give it? Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the questions. I think very interesting. I'll request each of the panelists to take up their portion and be as brief as you can. The extension can be given in the lunch session.
Or separate. Thank you, students, and thank you, Commodore Vasan, for making the speaker. Now, Tamil Nadu security, let us understand one thing. India is capable of taking care of itself. Whether it is Tamil Nadu security or security of the nation, even this Chinese vessel and all that, or Pakistani vessel. Yes, it is an irritant, it is a concern. There people are watching, just as they are watching us, we are also watching them. This includes, of course, even the future of militancy, as I said. Already I know southern states are keeping a close watch on the impact of what JVP this thing, when the Sri Lankan government got into the act, whether any of them would escape and come into India, all those things, the required government agencies are keeping a close watch. Of course, there may be slip-up, that's a different thing. Then caste politics, what can be the positives? First, remember, it is not only caste politics in Tamil Nadu, across India it is there. If you go up to the northeast tribal villages, there also it is in a different way, maybe. What can be the positives? Yes, definitely. See, for instance, the combo is there, for instance, in Singhala, I would say, because the Tamils are still divided a lot. Singhalas, it is the Govigama, split Govigamas, plus the non-Govigamas who constitute 40 to 45% of the Singhala population, they can hold the key. But let us remember, much as I was saying earlier, much as what we may think about the caste politics or Singhala Buddhist politics, it is a socio-economic divide that actually divides. So, whether it is Ranil today or Chandrika tomorrow or Rajapaksa, it is that dynamic that has worked, cutting across caste. But caste politics exists to the extent that, as Professor Suryanan is always fond of recalling, J.R. Jayavardhana, the president who came from a Govigama upcountry, hill country family, would not even allow his prime minister into the official residence because he came from a backward community. Right? So this dynamics works, it hurts, and when it comes to the other person, they hit back. This is what happened to Rajapaksa in the social context. All the Colombo 7 elite Govigama officials and ministers and politicians insulted them when they entered the Colombo politics. So when they came back, they started giving them back. Whether it is good or bad, that's a different thing. This is how the dynamics is. See, just as some of it is happening in India, but for want of time and otherwise, I don't want to explain, maybe later. How it affects Tamil Nadu politics? Or rather, what Tamil Nadu politicians have to say, all these things I am putting together. If you people have been noticing it, in the last 2 elections, Sri Lankan issue is not an election issue in Tamil Nadu. It never ever was. Unless there will be a lot of talk, political talk, editorials, newspaper column, TV debates and all that. But the Tamil Nadu voter has not voted on it. For instance, if that were so, in 2009, at the height of the war, and well, it ended within 3 days, Mr. Vaiko, MDMK, who was a spokesman of the Tamil cause in Tamil Nadu, lost by a huge margin in his native Sivagasi constituency, Lok Sabha constituency. Yeah? Yes. Yes. There are instances and instances. So, to assume, and this government, state government, if I have noticed, it has very clearly drawn a line on fishing issue and other issues of immediate consequence for Tamil Nadu. They take it up with the center. This state government has not issued one statement on Sri Lankan ethnic issue in the last 1.5 or 2 years. Right? And I know the inside story. I stop here. I think that's all to it, right? Have I answered all your questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I can be brief. Hampantota, Indian investment. Of course, actually Hampantota has got industrial area also. They wanted investment. But I don't think the India-China relationship, the climate is suitable for that. Because that land is leased by China. So that takes care of it. Even for Port City also, they wanted Indian investment. They came to Chennai also, if I remember correct, to meet Indian investors, and Chinese came. But the Galwan incident was a watershed in India-China relationship. The spy ship, you see, China had been mapping the Bay of Bengal from 2019 onwards. Chinese research ships have surveyed the entire thing. I think this particular ship is for Arabian Sea side. Chinese, one of the, if I remember correct, one of the Chinese bloggers had mentioned this in the Chinese language. So I think, and China has got the largest number of the so-called research ships. They have got 24 ships. And this class of ship is for satellite tracking, because China is also sending a large number of five ships, and they are for tracking. China is also sending satellites in space. You should not forget that. And that is how the spy ship is. We have responded, I think, very clearly. The Dornier aircraft, which was to be given earlier, which was to be come later, has been given. It will be tracked and kept. It is a sort of symbolic thing, I feel. And all ships, Chinese ships, are being tracked. You can be rest assured. We can have some other session on this. Chinese ambassadors visit. Definitely. The Chinese have invested some money. The ambassador was visiting the northern parts of how the Chinese investment was doing, and he tried to encourage investment. I don't think the Chinese, the Tamils there particularly resent, as much as the media makes out, any Chinese investment. At least to my knowledge, since we are in touch with Tamil media there, I think Mr. Satyamurthy also knows. He also writes the Tamil media constantly after me also, asking me my opinion. So I can tell you the public is not particularly as much anti-Chinese as we want them to believe. They are not. And the Chinese would prefer investments on large scale. They are not interested in this. For instance, sea cucumber, that factory was visited, which was cultivating sea cucumbers. They are all minor investments. Then on ethnic reconciliation, what was the question on ethnic reconciliation? The last one asked, pardon?
Skip it and come back, sir.
Yeah. The ethnic reconciliation.
All right, okay. The last panelist is General Shankar, and he will briefly respond to your queries. Please remember there is also a panel discussion. If some of the questions have not been taken up, it will also be covered later in the afternoon session of panel discussion, where all of us are going to be there. Thank you. Sir, I will request you to sum up towards the end of this. No questions. No questions from you.
No, after this.
After this, I will request you to comment for 2 minutes.
Right.
Of course, I will permit you.
2 minutes.
Okay. Now, when you look at the external factors, one factor which has really not come out and one factor which we are probably missing the wood for the trees is the international environment is changing very fast at this point of time. The after effect of the Ukraine war, the ongoing crisis between China and Taiwan, the internal problems of China and its weakening economy, which is going to be almost permanent now, especially due to COVID, and their own internal dynamics are changing the way China is going to behave. So if you think what China's behavior so far is, will be the thing extended into the future, I think we are off the mark. So that gives a great opportunity for India to act the way it wants. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan itself is in doldrums. Today, Pakistan, 3 years back, Pakistan was a net food exporter. Today, Pakistan is a net food importer. To that extent, Pakistan doesn't have time for Sri Lanka anymore. What does it tell you? It gives India a golden opportunity where Sri Lanka is getting into some kind of a geopolitical and a geo-economic isolation. With your proximity, with your linkages and whatever you have this opportunity. We'll talk of this opportunity and what to do and what we cannot do later in the evening when we are part of the panel. Right? Just hold your questions till then. Maybe then we can, go into it in a little more detail.
Which means all of you will have to wait.
So, with you may kindly have the last words.
Just
two or three comments which arise from the presentation of three great scholars. The first one about the caste in Tamil Nadu and all. We have a tremendous advantage. In India, the transition from English-educated upper caste fellows to vernacular-educated lower caste fellows have been very, very smooth. From Jawaharlal Nehru to Mulayam Singh Yadav, from Bhaktavatsalam to Kamaraj, all these are illustrations of radical change taking place in our political system without bloodshed. Look at other countries. Look at Pakistan, the Mujahis control, not there. In Sri Lanka, the Goigamas and the Vellalas control. This is the positive aspect of the caste transformation that is taking place in India. The second one, Lieutenant General Shankar, in his presentation had an excellent map. I wish it were here so that I could comment on it. I always ask my students, what are India's neighbors? So they will always point out to SAARC countries plus Myanmar. Nobody will point out there are two other countries which are very close to us. The distance between Indira Point, the last one in the Andaman, and the island of Pubresh in northwest Sumatra in Indonesia is less than the distance between Chennai and Tirupati. The distance between Indira Point and Phuket in Thailand is less than the distance between Chennai and Madurai. Why is it doesn't register in the student's mind? Because we do not think of the ocean. Whenever I speak in North Indian universities, I put the map of Asia upside down to point out how sea dominates. The other aspect that I want, if you read the annual report to the Ministry of External Affairs, there are two chapters. One is immediate neighborhood, which you all know, and then there is emerging neighborhood. In emerging neighborhood comes Southeast Asian countries. Once I asked Raghunath, the former foreign secretary, in a seminar in India International, how much more near should Indonesia be to India? How much more near should Phuket be to India for the Mandarins in the South Bloc to realize that it is not immediate, it is not emerging neighborhood, but immediate neighborhood. So we here must fight and take great interest in this country. And the map exactly revealed that. The one aspect which, again, none of the speakers mentioned was they gave the impression that China is looked with disfavor and all, which is true. I have no problem. But there are countries which China has won over, especially in Southeast Asia, where Cambodia has been won over, Myanmar has been won over, and many of them are neutral. Now we will have to understand these problems in greater detail. The great Singapore statesman Lee Kuan Yew, before he died, said, competition between United States and China is inevitable, but conflict is not. So long as the Chinese stakes in the United States remain, it is very difficult for the United States to go into armed conflict. Thank you very much. I have taken a lot of your time.
Thank you very much, sir. I know this was required because the student community here would gain immensely from you with your kind of knowledge. Just that we are running out of time and the lunch was getting cold. And but thank you everybody for this wonderful session, particularly the panelists who brought forward so much of information, with excellent slides and background information. Please join me in putting your hands together for this wonderful effort by the three speakers. Also, we were overshot by nearly 30 minutes, and therefore the lunch has been cut down to 30 minutes. So please finish your lunch and come. Luckily for us, there are two separate venues. One is for the resource persons and other dignitaries, and the other one is for students, so that there is no crowding. and we are able to finish this in 30 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation. Please join us back at 13. What time, organizers? 13:10. Please join us back at 13:10.